There's a face that lives in the collective memory of a generation, a face that for many is the feeling of Christmas. It's the wide-eyed shock, the mischievous smirk, the hands slapped to the cheeks in a silent scream that echoed through movie theaters and living rooms across the globe. We all know the boy, the accidental hero left to fend for himself in a world of clueless adults and bumbling burglars. He was Kevin McCallister, the resourceful, brilliant kid who made us all believe we could be the king of our own castle. But what happens when the Christmas lights are packed away, the booby traps are disarmed, and the family finally comes home for good? What happens to the boy when the world, which had made him its biggest star, suddenly turns its gaze away? The story of Macaulay Culkin isn't just the story of a beloved Christmas movie. It's a far more complex and human tale about the blinding glare of fame, the chilling darkness of its shadow, and the long, difficult journey of a man trying to find his way back not to the spotlight, but to himself. This is the story of the boy we all felt we knew, and the man he had to become when no one was watching. The world that Macaulay Culkin was born into in the late 1980s was a landscape on the cusp of change, yet still deeply rooted in a pre-internet monoculture. Fame was manufactured by a handful of studios, broadcast on a few dozen television channels, and cemented in the pages of glossy magazines. It was a time when a single film could achieve a kind of cultural saturation that is almost unimaginable today. There were no trending topics, no viral videos, just the slow, steady burn of word of mouth and a marketing machine that could turn a movie into a global event. Into this world came a Hollywood archetype that audiences adored: the precocious child. From Shirley Temple to Gary Coleman, the idea of a kid who was smarter, wittier, and more capable than the adults around them was a proven recipe for success. They were charming, they were funny, and they offered a kind of wish fulfillment for both children and parents. It was against this backdrop that a struggling actor named Kit Culkin, a man who had tasted the fringes of success but never its center, saw an opportunity. He and his partner, Patricia Bentrup, were raising a large family in a cramped 4-room apartment in New York City. Money was tight, and the stage offered a potential escape. Kit began pushing his children into the arts, and one of them, a charismatic blonde-haired boy named Macaulay, had a natural spark. Macaulay, or Mac as he was known, wasn't just cute. He was intelligent, with an almost unnerving ability to memorize lines and understand the nuances of a performance. He began working at the tender age of 4, appearing in off-Broadway plays where his talent was immediately apparent. He had a presence that belied his years. Theater critics noted his professionalism, his focus. This wasn't just a child reciting lines, this was a child acting. His break into film came with a small but memorable role opposite the legendary Burt Lancaster in the 1988 drama Rocket Gibraltar. The following year, he held his own against comedy giant John Candy in Uncle Buck. It was his performance in this John Hughes film that truly caught the industry's attention. As the inquisitive, almost interrogative nephew, Mac showcased a perfect blend of childhood innocence and startling maturity. John Hughes was so captivated by Culkin's talent that he began writing a new script, with him specifically in mind. He imagined a scenario he'd once had a fleeting anxiety about on a family vacation. What if they'd accidentally left one of the kids at home? The idea was simple, relatable, and with Macaulay Culkin at its center, it had the potential to be gold. The movie was called Home Alone. When Home Alone hit theaters in November 1990, no one was prepared for the cultural tsunami that was about to break. The film, made on a modest budget of $18 million, was a sleeper hit that refused to sleep. It stayed at the #1 spot at the box office for a staggering 12 consecutive weeks, well into 1991. It became the highest-grossing live-action comedy of all time, a record it would hold for over 2 decades. And at the heart of it all was Macaulay Culkin. He wasn't just the star of the movie, he was the movie. His face was on lunchboxes, posters, and pajamas. His catchphrases were repeated on playgrounds worldwide. At 10 years old, he was, without exaggeration, the most famous child on planet Earth. The transition was jarring. One moment, he was a kid from a crowded New York apartment. The next, he couldn't walk down the street without being mobbed. In interviews from the time, you can see the shift. The boy who was once just a talented young actor now had the weight of a global brand resting on his small shoulders. His father, Kit Culkin, immediately seized control. He became his son's manager, and his reputation in Hollywood quickly grew from that of a proud father to a notoriously difficult and demanding negotiator. He saw his son's fame as a long overdue vindication for his own stalled career. The financial rewards were astronomical. For the first Home Alone, Mac was paid a respectable $110,000. For the sequel, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, his salary skyrocketed to $4.5 million, making him the highest-paid child star in history. But the money came with strings, and those strings were being pulled tighter and tighter by his father. The pressure began to mount. The schedule was relentless. After the massive success of Home Alone, Mac was rushed into My Girl, a sweet but emotionally taxing film where his character's tragic death traumatized a generation of young viewers. It was a powerful performance, but one that required a level of emotional depth that was perhaps too much to ask of an 11-year-old. He was a professional, always hitting his marks. But the childlike joy was beginning to fade from his eyes, replaced by a weary competence. A crucial and often overlooked turning point in his early career was the 1993 thriller, The Good Son. Kit Culkin, eager to shatter the cute kid image and prove his son's dramatic range, allegedly leveraged his son's star power in a brutal Hollywood power play. 20th Century Fox wanted Mac for Home Alone 2, but Kit reportedly wouldn't sign off unless they also gave Mac the lead role in The Good Son, a dark, disturbing film about a psychopathic child. The studio, desperate for another holiday blockbuster, reluctantly agreed. The decision was a profound gamble. It placed Macaulay in a role that was the absolute antithesis of Kevin McCallister. He was no longer a mischievous hero. He was a cold, calculating villain who threatened his family and dropped his own cousin from a great height on a frozen lake. The film was a stark and uncomfortable watch, and it was a commercial and critical disappointment. Audiences simply weren't ready to see the adorable kid from Home Alone as a monster. The experience was reportedly isolating for Mac. He was still just a child, now tasked with embodying pure evil, all while navigating the complex politics of a studio system being strong-armed by his own father. It was a role that seemed to mirror the unsettling dynamics of his own life, a child being forced into a situation far too adult and sinister for his years. By 1994, after starring in a string of largely forgettable films like Getting Even with Dad and the live-action adaptation of Richie Rich, the burnout was complete. At just 14 years old, Macaulay Culkin, the boy who had reached the absolute pinnacle of global fame, did something unheard of. He quit. He had made 9 movies in 5 years. He was exhausted, not just by the work, but by the relentless pressure and the toxic environment that his fame and his father had created. He later recalled the moment he knew it was over, telling his parents, "I'm done, guys. Hope you all made your money because there's no more coming from me." It was a shocking declaration from a teenager who was the sole breadwinner for his large family. He wanted a break. He wanted a childhood. He wanted to go to high school. Little did he know, the biggest drama of his life was just beginning, and it would play out not on a film set, but in a courtroom. The moment Macaulay Culkin stepped away from the cameras, the fragile foundation of his family life crumbled. Without the unifying, lucrative focus of his career, the long-simmering tensions between his parents, Kit Culkin and Patricia Bentrup, exploded. In 1995, they split, igniting one of the most bitter and public custody battles of the decade. The fight wasn't just over the children. It was over the fortune Macaulay had earned. His estimated $17 million was now the central point of contention in his parents' war. For Mac, who had just turned 15, it was a profound betrayal. The money he had worked his entire childhood for was now being used as a weapon by the two people who were supposed to protect him. He was a witness in his own parents' divorce, forced to testify about their fitness as guardians. It was a cruel irony. The boy famous for being left home alone was now caught in the middle of a home being torn apart. This is where one of the most misunderstood chapters of his life began. In a move that was widely reported as a child divorcing his parents, Macaulay took legal action to have both his mother and father removed as his legal guardians, effectively blocking them from controlling his fortune. It wasn't an act of teenage rebellion. It was an act of profound self-preservation. He had seen firsthand how his earnings had corrupted his family, and this was his only way to sever the connection between love and money. He later clarified, "I just wanted to take my father's name off of it." By it, he meant the contract, the career, the whole crushing machine. The legal battle was successful, and an accountant was appointed to oversee his finances until he turned 18. He had won his financial freedom, but the emotional cost was immeasurable. His relationship with his father was shattered, and they would remain estranged for the rest of Kit's life. During this period of retreat, Mac sought out friendships with people who could understand his unique, distorted reality. His most famous and most controversial friendship was with Michael Jackson. To the outside world, their bond was baffling and suspicious. But from Culkin's perspective, it was simple. "He was my best friend," Culkin has stated time and time again. He saw Jackson not as a global pop icon, but as one of the few people on earth who knew exactly what it was like to have your childhood sacrificed at the altar of fame. They connected over a shared experience of being the family breadwinner from a young age, of never knowing a normal life. Jackson's Neverland Ranch, with its amusement park rides and zoo, was a fantasy land, but for Mac it was a place where he could finally feel like a kid, away from the prying eyes of the public and the pressures of his family. When allegations against Jackson surfaced, Culkin became a key figure, called to testify at Jackson's 2005 trial. His testimony was unwavering. He stated under oath that he had slept in Jackson's bed numerous times, but that absolutely nothing inappropriate had ever happened. He has never, in the many years since, wavered from this account, fiercely defending his friend and describing their relationship as pure and innocent. For Mac, it was a matter of loyalty to someone who had shown him kindness during the most turbulent period of his life. As he entered his late teens and early 20s, the world watched and waited for the inevitable child star meltdown. The narrative was already written. He married actress Rachel Miner at just 17, a union that ended in divorce 2 years later. He was rarely seen publicly, and when he was, tabloids would publish unflattering photos, often accompanied by speculative, grim headlines. The public image of the bright, cherubic Kevin McCallister had been completely replaced by the specter of a troubled, lost young man. That narrative seemed to reach its grim conclusion in September 2004. Macaulay Culkin was arrested in Oklahoma City for possession of marijuana and 2 controlled substances without a prescription. The mugshot, showing a gaunt, disheveled 24-year-old, went global. It was the "I told you so" moment for the tabloid industry. Here was the proof. The richest child star in history had succumbed to the cliché. He received a suspended sentence after pleading guilty, but the damage to his public persona was immense. For years, he was dogged by persistent and unfounded rumors of severe drug addiction, particularly heroin use. The ghoulish speculation became so intense that he was forced to address it directly years later, flatly denying the claims while admitting he had certainly dabbled with drugs in his youth. "I was not pounding 6-packs of heroin every day," he would later quip, with a touch of his old, sardonic wit. The arrest was a low point, but it was also perhaps a necessary bottom. It was the moment the world's worst fears were projected onto him, and in surviving that, he was finally free to build something new. The story of Macaulay Culkin could have ended there, becoming just another sad footnote in the long list of child stars who burned out. But that would be underestimating the same resourcefulness and intelligence that made Kevin McCallister a hero. His return to public life in the 2010s was not a comeback in the traditional Hollywood sense. There was no tearful interview on a talk show couch, no starring role in a blockbuster designed to reignite his career. Instead, what emerged was a slow, deliberate, and often bizarre reclamation of his own narrative. He didn't run from his past. He embraced it, twisted it, and turned it into a form of performance art. In 2013, he co-founded a comedy rock band called the Pizza Underground. The band's entire gimmick was that they performed parody versions of Velvet Underground songs with the lyrics changed to be about pizza. It was absurd, hilarious, and deeply weird. It was also a brilliant statement. It was Macaulay Culkin, the man whose every move had been scrutinized for its commercial potential, doing something utterly defiantly uncommercial. It was for him, for his friends, for the joke. The project was met with a mixture of confusion and delight, but it signaled a clear shift. Mac was back, and he was playing by his own rules. This new persona, self-aware, ironic, and allergic to taking himself seriously, was further cultivated through his satirical website and podcast, Bunny Ears. He would write articles like How to Stay Relevant When You Haven't Had a Hit Movie Since Pogs Were Cool, and host podcasts where he would interview other actors and comedians with a laid-back, rambling charm. He was deconstructing his own celebrity in real time. He understood that the world would never let him escape being Macaulay Culkin, so he decided to become the world's foremost expert on the subject. One of his most masterful moves came in 2018. In an advertisement for Google Assistant, he reprised his role as Kevin McCallister. But this wasn't the 10-year-old Kevin. This was a 38-year-old Kevin, still in the same house, but now using modern technology to pull off his old tricks. He recreated the iconic scenes, jumping on the bed, ordering pizza, setting the booby traps, but with the weary sigh of an adult. It was a stroke of genius. The ad went viral, not just because it was nostalgic, but because it was a perfect encapsulation of his journey. He was acknowledging the character that made him, but showing that he and the world had moved on. It was a shared inside joke with an entire generation. In recent years, he has cautiously dipped his toe back into more serious acting, but on his own terms. He chose projects that were interesting and unexpected. His role in the 10th season of American Horror Story in 2021 was met with critical acclaim. He played a complex, tragic character, and reviewers praised the depth and vulnerability of his performance. It was a powerful reminder that beneath the layers of irony and self-parody, the gifted actor who had captivated the world 30 years prior was still there. The most significant consequence of Macaulay Culkin's tumultuous journey is its lasting impact on the entertainment industry itself. His story became the ultimate cautionary tale. The public implosion of his family and his subsequent burnout forced a long overdue conversation about the protections for child actors. His name became synonymous with the potential perils of early fame, and his legal battle to protect his own earnings helped shine a light on the financial exploitation that was rampant in the industry. His case contributed to the strengthening of what are often called Coogan laws, legislation designed to protect a portion of a child actor's earnings in a trust they can't access until they are adults. He became a ghost that haunted every subsequent child star's success, a constant reminder of the high price of fame. But his historical significance goes beyond just being a cautionary tale. In his later years, he has flipped the script. He represents a new model of surviving celebrity. In an age of curated social media perfection, he is radically, refreshingly authentic. He doesn't hide his strangeness. He puts it on display. He doesn't lament his past. He uses it as comedic fodder. He demonstrated that it's possible to step out of the inferno of global fame, not unscathed, but intact, and with your sense of humor and identity firmly in your own hands. He showed that you don't have to play the game to win. Sometimes, the most powerful move is to knock the whole board over and go eat some pizza. Perhaps the most telling part of his current life is its quiet normality. In a world away from Hollywood premieres and tabloid headlines, he built a family with actress Brenda Song, who herself was a former child star with Disney. They met on a film set in Thailand, bonding over their shared, unusual upbringings. In 2021, they welcomed their first son, and in 2023, their second. The man who was once the most famous boy in the world was now a father, and by all accounts a happy and devoted one. The cycle, it seemed, had been broken. The boy who was defined by his fictional family and then torn apart by his real one had finally created a home of his own. In the end, the story of Macaulay Culkin is a story of survival. It's a testament to the resilience of a person who was given everything the world had to offer and then had to spend the rest of his life dealing with the cost. He navigated a childhood that would have broken most people, withstood the ridicule of a world that loves to build up its idols just to watch them fall, and emerged on the other side not as a tragic figure, but as a man who seems to have found a measure of peace. He didn't find it by chasing the fame he once had, but by walking away from it, by learning to laugh at the absurdity of his own life, and by finding love and purpose far from the glare of the spotlight. The mischievous, clever kid who outsmarted the burglars grew into a man who outsmarted the entire celebrity machine. He didn't just survive his past, he took ownership of it. And in doing so, Macaulay Culkin, the boy who once wished his family would disappear, finally found his way home. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.